I'm going to talk about extending the robot framework with custom keywords. Or actually, I'm doing this talk because I want to show some code. And this is about how I dealt with a social hours integration. Just quickly about me, I'm Nils Balkow-Tychsen. I'm a senior QA engineer at Humanitec, and how I sometimes feel like is a professional copy and paste programmer. So like the code I'm writing, I'm getting mostly from Stack Overflow. I'm trying it out and I see if it works. And often it works. Sometimes I have to add a little bit of glue, but this is fine. And if you see this meme, this is rarely happening to me. So I don't feel like I'm doing honest work. But nonetheless, what I'm trying to say here and what I'm trying to encourage you, since I'm showing a lot of code in my slides actually today, this is not magic. This is very easy to use. And if you just try it out and have a look at it, it's not that hard. So feel free to give it a go and give it a try. All right. So what am I actually talking about? I have to give you a little bit of context. So I'm talking about the robot framework. It's a nice, versatile testing framework. And I have to introduce it a little bit to you so you're understanding what this code is actually about. And I also need to let you know what we at Humanitec are actually working on, which is your internal development platform. So nice automation, DevOps kind of thing. And it's currently called Valhalla, but more about that later. And then last but not least, the part which I'm super excited about is actually showing you some code. And in those examples will be overall 3 examples. It's Python implementations of custom keywords I made in Robot Framework. Yeah, so Robot Framework. Main reasons for me to use it, it's self-documenting end-to-end test automation. It's keyword-driven. Which you will see in the code, how this actually looks. And it's very easy to integrate into behavior-driven development workflows, because you can just take your user stories, put them in Robot Framework, and then run them. Overall has a great support, nice Slack community. At the beginning of this year, I've been in Helsinki to the RoboCon. It was overall 300 people at this software testing conference, all about Robot Framework. So very interesting. All open source. It has many libraries, many supporters. Overall, good documentation. Yeah, and one of the reasons why I'm using it, I like doing things in Python. So Robot Framework is completely Python-based, and it's very extendable by Python code. So you can just write any .py file and use your definitions you're writing in there and use them in your Robot Framework tests. Has some all-in-one reporting, XML, HTML format. I'll also show to you. Yeah, and if you want to try it out yourself, like my colleagues, Kutai and Amela, they did earlier this year actually a presentation. And there's still this GitHub demo repository, which shows you some UI and API testing and also how this keyword documentation works and so on. So if you want to give it a try, that's what it is about. Yeah, so why do I actually want to extend Robot Framework, right? So I already talked about that it has so many libraries and it's so nice to use and everything is already there. But there can be particular reasons why you want to extend it. So you could have some specific functionality. So for example, some sort of API or CLI which was provided to you by your developers and it's not publicly available, but you still want to use it in your tests and just want to automate and orchestrate it. So you can just add it to your Robot Framework and build a custom keyword for it. And also sometimes it's really nice if you just can wrap things into a custom keyword because you want to add some seed data before your test, or you have some cleanup tasks, or you need to talk to some external APIs. By nature, Robot Framework is usually assessing every line of the test you're writing, and sometimes you don't really want that because you just want this part to work and have an assessment only afterwards. Yeah. So that's about Robot Framework. Now we are actually getting to the part where I wanted to show you a little video. It's only 30 seconds. It's very, very short, and it will describe basically the product, what we are working on at Humanitec.
Humanitec's platform empowers engineering teams around the world to design services and apps faster than ever before. It connects to all your systems from version control to CI, from secrets management to your cloud, and unites teams in one end-to-end flow. Discover and reuse the services you already have. Design new ones and deploy them to a multi-cloud environment with the click of a button. Become lightning fast when it comes to building and maintaining modern apps or modernizing your legacy IT. This is Humanitec, and it's changing the way we share and build code.
Yeah, so we are working on deployment automation. And so what we at the moment have integrated is GitHub. Our tool is called Valhalla. We enable people to get their GitHub repositories into Valhalla, and as soon as they have a Docker file, so in a containerizable app, we can basically, you can basically configure it in Valhalla and then say, now deploy and run in Kubernetes, and now deploy and have a test environment, and now deploy and have a staging environment, and configure this like this and configure that like that. So this is basically what I'm testing every day. Since a year, but it's good fun. But one of the hardest things to overcome in the very beginning is, right now our platform only allows people to log in with their GitHub account, right? So we have a GitHub social auth integration. Have you all heard about social auth integrations? Have you ever tested a social auth integration? Please, no? Are you sure? Okay, so like a lot of websites you see out there, you can either log in with your Twitter, Facebook, or GitHub account, right? So and how this works is you implement in your website basically the social auth login. You talk to the identity provider, which could be GitHub in my case, and then they basically return an access token to you back, and you can log in, and they say that this account is good and valid, and then you can give them access to your tool by using the social authentication. So they basically, into Valhalla, you basically log in with your GitHub account. So how this looks is when you log into Valhalla, you actually see the screen, and then you have to authorize your GitHub account and also your GitHub organization. So my challenges with GitHub social auth. So I have this constraint that one user in Valhalla has to have one GitHub account and has to have a GitHub organization, right? So, and I don't know, like how many GitHub users do you guys have? I maybe have now 20, but it's really like automating the creation of a GitHub user. This is nothing you want to really deal with, because this is heavily changing almost on a weekly basis. So you basically need to take good care of the users you have, and you also, like, if you're creating like 10 GitHub users in a row, you get easily flagged by them, and then you have to write them a ticket, you have to wait 48 hours until they come back to you, and then you can create another GitHub user. So this is nothing you want to deal with, basically. So my solution is to take good care of the GitHub users I have, and the challenges I have been facing is I can only use one GitHub user at a time for one test run. So if I have multiple test runs at the same time, I need to make sure that they are not using the same GitHub user. So I need to make sure this GitHub user is used by this test run and this is by this test run, so they don't interfere. So they suddenly like create a repository here, or add a PR, or do something else, and this is something I don't want. And then next on the list is GitHub security verification. So because it's a social auth provider, they throw a couple of security verifications in your way. So if you're logging in from a different IP, and I hope to show this to you today because I never logged in from this IP to GitHub with my accounts, then they actually ask for a device verification. So they send you an email and so on, and you have to verify things. So automating that is fun. And then controlling the state of a GitHub user. So GitHub luckily has a really nice API, and I'll go into detail on how to deal with that. So like resetting your GitHub account, deleting repositories, creating repositories, this kind of stuff. All right, now the fun part is starting. So GitHub user can only be used once at a time. So my solution for this problem has been to store the users in the database, mark them as in use while the test is running. When the test is done, make them available again. And as easy as this is sounding, this was actually quite interesting to do. So I decided to, for my implementation, I decided to use AWS DynamoDB, a nice NoSQL database, very easy to use, very easy to put data into, and it actually is nicely accessible by a Python library called Boto3. So actually all AWS resources you can use with this library. So let me show you. So this is actually my small database. So I have a couple of test users. I have their emails, I have their organizations, and I store a status with them. And then I also record when I have updated this the last time, right? So just to have an example for you guys how this is looking. And then in terms of implementation, so I was already telling you, like, any Python file, like .py file you write, you can basically use as keyword definitions in your robot framework. And I will show a robot framework in a second, but this is basically the Python implementation of a custom keyword. So in the end of the day, the definition you see here, so def get test user, gets actually available to me inside my test library. And just to quickly talk you through, so it's importing a couple of libraries. I need to deal with certain things. For example, also the Boto3 library. In line 15, I'm actually scanning the table for the first user, which is known as available, so has a status available. And then I'm basically assigning username and password to a variable, setting the status of the user in use. So you can see this in line 23 and 24. Also returning if there's no user found, that there's no user available, which ultimately leads my test suite to fail. But in the end, then returning, and in this case to the robot framework test suite, returning the username, the password, the GitHub organization, and actually the status of the user. So I'm able to use this. So this is one part of the story. And then in robot framework, and I'm guessing most of you are seeing like robot framework keyword implementation for the very first time. But I have a settings section where I can just define a library, and in this case, it's my user_db.py, which you've just seen. And then in line 6 already, you can see that I'm assigning the variables I'm getting back from getTestUser. And the robot framework does not care if you write things in uppercase or lowercase, or if you have spaces in between, or if you have underscores. This is why it gets much more readable in your actual test file. So here the get_test_user turns into getTestUser and gets much more readable in my opinion. So I'm getting those informations. And also I'm defining two keywords, so one basically to get a user from the database, and then I have another keyword which I can use in my tests to set the user status to free again, so basically giving them back so another test can use them. And let me see, so what I want to do now is showing you a quick login test actually. Let's see if this is working. Always very exciting to do this live. But yeah, accessing staging environment of our Valhalla platform, actually doing the GitHub sign-in. So this is where the social house comes in. You see in the URL, we are at GitHub. And now the device verification part comes. And I actually have to get a key from an email. I will show this to you in the next implementation. But this has been quite a tricky part, actually. And then once this is there, just have to wait for the email to arrive. Then there is a code, and I can verify it. And I can log in. So this is actually the end of this test, just verifying that I'm able to log in. So one of the most crucial things I actually need to verify that people are able to log into our system. Then, just to show you an example of how this report looks like. So this was from an earlier test run, but it's the same test, and I'm see that everything was working fine. And if I look in my test, then I can see like browser is open to desktop URL. When I log in with my username and password, then the dashboard page should be displayed. So it's nice BDD format, and behind that I have a couple of keywords I'm basically calling, but this is how it looks. And then just to see where the user was taken from the database, it's a bit hidden in my tests here because I do a couple of other things when I set this up. But here I'm already calling, if there is no credentials, so if the credential list is empty, run the get user credentials from database. And this is exactly the keyword we have seen before. And if I expand this, I can see get user credentials from database. And here I can actually see then that my custom keyword is being run, and I can see that those values have been returned in this case. So robot Tim, another of my GitHub test users, and my password. It's not the real password. And yeah, and the organization, and that it's now in use. All right. I hope this is entertaining for you so far. Okay, so the second thing on the list, GitHub security verifications. Since you already seen the test for this, I won't run it again, I promise. But I'll tell you some details on this. So you've seen this verification, and what's actually happening when it shows me this page, it sends an email to the email account of this GitHub user, and I'm required to get this six-digit number from this email and then put it into the web form. Right? So how do you do this? There's a nice tool called Mailosaur.io. It's a paid service, but it's quite cheap in my opinion, and it's very easy to integrate. So I want to quickly show you how this is actually done inside Robot Framework. So I'm actually getting, this is the email I'm getting in my email inbox, and I need to grab this verification code. This is how, if I logging into Mailosaurus, I'm able to see this already in a JSON body. And if I'm talking to the Mailosaurus API, then I can already see how my JSON object is looking, and I know what I need to get, basically. Also, just to give you a little bit more context, like this is Mailosaurus. It has a really nice and easy to use documentation, and this is what I've been talking on about, like just copy and pasting code, right? So they have a nice developer implementation. You can choose like Ruby, Python, Java, whatever. You just copy and paste this, and you have access to your email inbox, and that's it. So it's a really nice and easy tool. And I'm not want to do too much thing. I'm not getting any much for this, but it's actually also quite cheap in my opinion. But yeah. So. All right. So in terms of code, it's kind of the same thing you've just seen there. So I'm defining a keyword or a definition called get verification code, passing on the username from my test framework. So it goes into the email inbox of this user at Mailosaurus. I get all the messages, or I get the last message which is there, and then I'm using a regular expression like the \d and then curly bracket 6. You see there in line 12. Basically the regular expression to get a 6-digit number out of the email body. And then I return the first find I do. And then I have another keyword for deleting emails as well, just to clean up things, basically. And then, again, in my robot test suite, how this is looking, I have a keyword-defined PaaS GitHub verification process, which I can just call. I need to pass the GitHub username to give it some context. I have a sleep implemented. I'm really sorry, guys. I know it's it's bad, but those emails can sometimes take ages to arrive, and it's really, in my opinion, still a hassle to deal with it. But once it's there, I can just run my my custom keyword definition, get verification code. You've just seen as a definition in Python in the other file, so Mailosaurus_keywords.py, and I get the code, I put it into this nice CSS selector, so the input box in line 10, and then I click the button to, I think it says verify or something, but yeah. And luckily, these CSS selectors have not been changed much by GitHub so far, so for 1 year, I'm running clean with these for now. Yeah, and then last but not least, controlling the state of the of a GitHub user organization and its repositories. I already mentioned this to you guys, so there's a nice GitHub API, and this nice GitHub API is also wrapped into a Python library called PyGitHub. And by using this, you can, I want to demo you one example here in particular, where I replace content in a file which is hosted on GitHub. Right, so this is one of my test cases in Valhalla, for example. I deploy an application, then I change some sort of wording on the UI of this application, and then I deploy the application again through Valhalla, and then I need to check if this has actually applied. So now my nice web frontend is showing now this different content. So I defined a custom keyword, which is just replace file content. It needs a pattern to search for, it needs some string to update. I need to pass on the repository, the file name I want to update, username and password of my GitHub user, and also the organization, because I'm also always working with GitHub users in organizations. GitHub needs, for whatever reason, the file char to make sure that it's the actual file. I need to get the content. I need to get the repository object to be able to talk to the GitHub repository. So this is repo equals get repository and so on. And then I need to decode the actual file content so I'm able to update it. So I need to put it in a readable UTF-8 format so I can easily update it. And I do this again just with a regular expression. So I'm looking for my pattern, replace it with my update string I have been passing on to my robot from my robot framework, and then I run the repo.update file. So these are all functions provided by PyGitHub basically to deal with it. What you see here in the parameters is basically the file name, and then this long like f string with some substitutions in there is basically the commit node I'm providing. So that's also possible to define. And then once I have this custom keyword, I can just use it in my regular robot framework test suite. And I made a small demo for you guys so you can see what's actually happening. So the test case here, and in this example, I'm actually putting settings, test cases, and keywords into one file. Usually you would separate it just to have it cleaner. So at least test cases in one file, keywords in another file, and then you would reference them. But yeah, this gives some nice overview. So update the text in the README MD, and then I'm calling keyword demo commit to GitHub via robot tests. And then in my keywords definition, I have this keyword, and this is actually then calling the replace file content. I'm looking for a string ctm-demo. I'm replacing it with hello to you guys. It's inside a repository called ctm-demo. The file is a README MD. I'm using my GitHub account for it, which is currently part of one of my test users organizations. So let me quickly show this to you. It's already running. So this has already passed. So here it still shows CTN demo, and let me just quickly refresh this page. And now it's hello continues testing Meetup. So in the commit notes, you can see I tried this a couple of times to see if it's actually working. But there's my commit just 21 seconds ago. So this is how you take control of your GitHub users if you have a bunch of them, like herd of sheep or something. I don't know. Yeah, so we are getting to the end of this. And I think I'm still in time. So yeah, just a quick wrap up. So to overcome the challenges of GitHub social authentication, I managed to flag my users to be in use by storing them in a database. GitHub security verifications, nice and easy to overcome with a Mailosaurus account to be actually able to get via REST API the contents of your emails you're receiving. And then last but not least, it was about the GitHub API and establishing some control over your GitHub users and the state of your repositories and so on. So if you have any questions Or if you want to try out Valhalla, reach out to me or talk to my colleagues. So enjoy. Yes?
Please go back to the mail part.
Yeah.
Could you repeat the question?
Can we go back to the email part? So it's about the Mailosaurus implementation. So what do you want to see?
Yes, so okay, we get the verification code, we parse it out, and then if you go one forward to the robot.
Yeah. So here I call get verification code. So it's exactly that definition. And I'm assigning I'm passing on the GitHub username at the very end. And I'm assigning this to the variable $code, right? And then input text. So inside $code, there's now my 6-digit number, basically, I need for the verification. And I just use a Selenium library. So there's a library called Selenium library, which gives me access to all the Selenium keywords. And I just do input text on this CSS selector, and then it puts in the 6-digit number.
My question is, how does the get verification code map to your
that's a little bit of robot framework magic. But basically, so I'm having in here, I have the I'm mapping a library, which is basically my Python file. And this is my Python file. And inside my Python file, there's a definition called get verification code. And since robot framework does not care about like uppercase or lowercase or space or underscore, it's all the same to it, which has like upsides and downsides. One of the things you basically see is you have to at least have like in between all your functions and variables, you at least have to have like 2 spaces in between to make it work. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Welcome.
Kind of a general question. How does the robot framework compare to Cucumber combined with Gherkin?
Yeah, I mean, it's in the end of the day, it's the same thing, right? So, I mean, I'm also a big fan of WebDriver.io, and you kind of can establish similar things. The one thing which I think WebDriver.io, and correct me if I'm wrong, does not provide is the integration of so many libraries directly into the testing framework. I mean, with WebDriver.io, you have access to all like JavaScript or Node libraries or NPM install things you can use. But with Robot Framework, and I wanted to show you this as well, you can you have access to a lot of custom-made libraries. So currently, this is a list, and you can like easily do things. I don't know, on this one, not sure if you can read it very well, but there's a JSON schema library, and there's something specifically for Jenkins, or there's something which helps you deal with, I don't know, all sorts of things. Yeah, so there's like many integration, and like the people who are using Robot Framework are not necessarily website testers or web application testers. So there's a lot of things for embedded testing, for example, or a lot of things about robotic process automation, right? So where you're like there's a library to deal with SAP UI or Windows UI or something like that, right? So you have that all in one framework, and you can just use it. So currently, we have something like 107 custom libraries available here. Yeah.
Wait.
That was close.
Yeah. Nice. Just
the NASA is also using Robot Framework, actually.
just 2 remarks about the, I think it was your first script about the GitHub access.
Yeah.
You used a very general pattern to handle that, like you database, and you marked it as used, which of course only works if your app is the only app tracking that.
Come again, if my...
this only works if your app is the only app tracking that. If this is like a general GitHub rule that it can only be used once.
Yeah.
Of course, like this is your app.
Yeah. So this is specific to my application, right? So other social house integrations, you often have like different ways and can have many different users. But in my particular case, because like we have developers dealing with code and they need to have access to the GitHub account, and we want to make things easier for them, there's a one-to-one mapping in terms of this social authentication.
Yeah. Just one remark about that. I would update the database immediately.
Immediately?
Maybe you can go back to that script.
I was trying to at least, I mean, there's, I'm like my GitHub users are visible, and there's also part of my emails.
Go to the code, please. I would do this update DB immediately after checking. Just a little remark to maybe make it more stable.
Right. So the update is actually happening earlier. Yeah. It's a good idea. Yeah.
I was the first one using this. So who is the next? No one?
No. All right. That worked. All right. Cool.
Thank you.
All right, guys. There's 2 more talks. So thank you very much. That's great.